Tonight, I've gathered some of the darkest and most chilling, true horror stories from across the internet. Stories whispered in forgotten forums, buried in late-night Reddit threads, and shared by people who swore they'd never speak of it again. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you right now? Get comfortable, put your headphones in, and whatever you do, don't look behind you. Let's begin. It was supposed to be a weekend of celebration, an escape from the grind of our daily lives, to commemorate Dave's recent job promotion. The five of us, myself, Dave, Jenna, Mark, and Leah, had been inseparable since college, and these little trips had become our tradition. This time, we'd chosen a cabin tucked away in the woods, miles from the nearest town, a perfect retreat where we planned to relax, have a few drinks, and reminisce about the old days. We arrived late Friday afternoon, the sun casting long shadows through the dense trees surrounding the cabin. The place was more secluded than we'd anticipated, but it was exactly what we needed. A picturesque log cabin overlooking a small lake, the tranquility of the setting, making the stresses of the city seem a world away. We unpacked, settled in, and by dusk, the cabin was alive, with the sound of laughter and music. We grilled dinner on the back porch, watched the sun dip below the horizon, and as darkness enveloped the woods around us, we gathered inside by the fireplace. Jenna poured everyone another round of drinks, as Dave started a spirited toast to the best friends anyone could ask for, and to hopefully not remembering this night tomorrow. We all cheered, the warmth of the fire, and the joy of being together filling the room. But the merriment was short-lived. Just as we were settling into an old familiar debate about the best horror movie of all time, the lights flickered ominously, before going out completely, plunging us into darkness. A few uneasy chuckles filled the air, as we scrambled for our phones, their dim lights ghostly in the sudden blackout. "It's probably just a fuse," Mark said, his voice cutting through the nervous murmurs. "I'll check the box. It should be around back." I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, and followed him, the beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness. The night was eerily still, the usual sounds of the woods muted, as if holding its breath. Mark fiddled with the fuse box, the flashlight propped awkwardly under his arm. "Looks like it's been tripped," he muttered, flipping the main switch. The light should have come back on, but nothing happened. "That's odd," he said, scratching his head. "Let me try." He was cut off by a sudden rustling in the bushes nearby, the sound sharp in the quiet. We both froze, the flashlight's beam darting to the source of the noise. "Probably just a raccoon," Mark whispered, but his voice betrayed a hint of doubt. We headed back inside, unease growing in the pit of my stomach. The others were gathered around the windows, peering into the darkness. "Did you guys get it fixed?" Leah asked, trying to keep the worry out of her voice. "No, something's not right," I replied. "The power's still out." And we heard something outside. Before anyone could respond, a loud bang echoed through the cabin, startling us all. It came from the front door. We turned just in time to see the door being forced open, a cold gust of wind sweeping in with the dark silhouette of a person. The intruder stepped forward, a mask obscuring their face, a chilling smile painted across it. Dave stepped in front of us defensively, but the intruder was quick, too quick. There was a flash of metal, a horrible wet sound, and Dave collapsed. A cry of pain cut tragically short. Panic erupted. Jenna screamed. Leah dialed 911 on her shaking phone, and Mark and I rushed to Dave, who was on the floor, blood pooling around him. The intruder, however, didn't stay. As quickly as they had entered, they vanished back into the darkness of the night, leaving us in chaos and fear. The line dead as Leah tried to call for help. "We need to secure the cabin," I said, my voice barely steady. "And we need to stay together. Whoever that was, they're still out there." After the intruder fled, the cabin felt like a besieged fortress. We were shaken, terrified, a friend down, and isolated from the outside world. The gravity of our situation sank in. We were targets, and we didn't know why or if the attacker would come back. Mark and I dragged a heavy bookshelf in front of the door, barricading it as best as we could, while Jenna and Leah tended to Dave, who was barely conscious, his breathing labored. The sight of him, pale and bleeding on the floor, was a stark reminder of our vulnerability. "There's no signal," Leah said, her voice edged with panic as she fumbled with her phone. "I can't get through to anyone. We need to stay calm," I insisted, though my own pulse raced uncontrollably. "Help will come. The rental company knows we're here. They'll send someone when they realize we haven't checked out tomorrow." But as hours dragged on, the likelihood of making it until morning seemed slim. Every shadow beyond the windows, every noise from the surrounding woods sent us into a silent hysteria. We spoke little, listening instead to the haunting sounds of the night, each of us lost in our thoughts, nursing our terror. Mark, ever the pragmatist, had found a hunting rifle in a storage closet, likely forgotten or overlooked by a previous renter. It offered a small comfort, a means to defend ourselves if the intruder returned. "We need a plan," Jenna said quietly, her eyes red from crying, but fierce with a newfound resolve. "If they come back, we can't just wait here like sitting ducks. We hold up until dawn," I suggested. "If no one comes by then, we'll make a break for the car. It's a long shot to the main road, but we'll have a better chance together in the open than trapped in here." The others agreed, though the decision provided little relief. We set up shifts to watch the windows and door, the rifle always at hand. As my turn came, I sat by the window, peering out into the impenetrable blackness, every shadow a potential threat. The wait was agonizing, a test of nerves. It was near midnight, when the tranquility was once again shattered. A loud crash came from the back of the cabin, where the bedrooms were. We had assumed the intruder would come back through the front. It was a fatal oversight. "Back door," Mark shouted, grabbing the rifle. We ran to the back, only to see the door swinging open, the cold night air pouring in. The intruder was there, another figure with him this time, both masked, both stepping into the cabin with a terrifying calmness. Mark raised the rifle, his hand steady despite the chaos. "Get out," he yelled, his voice echoing through the small cabin. The intruders didn't speak. Instead, they advanced, undeterred by the weapon. It was a standoff that lasted seconds but felt like hours, until Mark did the unthinkable. He pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening, the flash blinding. One intruder fell, while the other retreated, disappearing into the night from which they had emerged. We rushed to lock the door again, hearts pounding, the reality of what had happened settling over us like a heavy shroud. We spent the rest of the night in silence, watching over Dave, who had slipped into unconsciousness, his condition worsening by the minute. By the time the first light of dawn crept through the trees, we were exhausted, spent from fear and grief. The sound of a car approaching brought us to our feet. It was the police, finally, along with an ambulance. Neighbors had reported hearing gunshots and alerted the authorities. It was over, or so it seemed. As we left the cabin, the morning light revealed the true horror of the night. Outside, the ground was marked with signs of struggle, blood spattered on the leaves, and two lifeless bodies, reminders of the nightmare we had lived through. Dave didn't make it. The loss was a heavy burden, a shadow that would hang over us forever. The intruders were identified as locals, known criminals, their motives unclear but fatally apparent. I always thought my neighborhood was safe. That belief shattered one autumn evening, when my parents decided to visit my aunt, who was hospitalized after a car accident, leaving me home alone. I was 17, and while I enjoyed the freedom, the weight of being alone for the weekend felt oddly unsettling. It was around 10 p.m. when I heard the first noises. Initially, I thought it was just the wind. The trees around our house had a way of making the creepiest sounds when branches scraped against the windows. But then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from the deck at the back of the house. My heart raced. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my first instinct was to freeze and listen. Silence returned for a brief moment, and I wondered if my fear had gotten the best of me. Just as I started to relax, a loud crash shattered the quiet. Glass breaking from the kitchen. This was no branch. Someone was trying to break in. I ran to my dad's study, locked the door, and dialed 911. Whispering, I told the dispatcher, my address, and that someone had broken into my house. They urged me to stay on the line and keep quiet until help arrived. Hiding under the desk, I could hear more noises now. Footsteps, the ransacking of drawers. The intruders were talking in hushed tones, but I couldn't make out the words. Fear gripped me tighter as I realized there was more than one person in my home. Minutes stretched on like hours as I waited, shivering for the police to come. Then abruptly, the noises stopped. Had they heard me on the phone? I held my breath, listening. Footsteps approached the study, and then someone tried the handle. When it didn't budge, they started pounding on the door. "Open up, kid. We know you're in there," a gruff voice called out, sending chills down my spine. I didn't respond, clutching the phone tighter. The dispatcher's voice in my ear was the only thing keeping me from panicking completely. "Police are almost there. Just hold on," she reassured me. The banging intensified, the wood frame groaning under the blows. I knew the door wouldn't hold much longer. I looked around desperately for anything to defend myself with, my hands landing on an old golf club my dad had left in the corner. Just as the door began to splinter, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The intruders cursed, and suddenly, the house fell silent again. They were running now, fleeing before the police could catch them. When the officers finally arrived, they found me shaking uncontrollably, clutching the golf club like a lifeline. They were able to secure the house and started a search for the intruders, but it was too late. They had vanished into the night. The aftermath was a blur of police officers taking statements, dusting for fingerprints, and my parents rushing home. The intruders had not been just thieves. They were dangerous. They had weapons on them, likely prepared to use them if necessary. As I lay in bed that night, the house finally quiet and secured, the terror of what could have happened haunted me. I realized then that safety is never guaranteed, and the peace of my old life was shattered beyond repair. In the days that followed the break-in, our home became a fortress. My parents installed a new security system with cameras and motion sensors. Every window was fitted with heavy-duty locks, and discussions of moving to a new neighborhood began to surface at dinner. But the sense of safety that was supposed to return with these upgrades never materialized for me. Instead, a persistent anxiety took root in my chest, blooming each night as darkness fell. Sleep became elusive. Every little sound, a car passing, the house settling, sent me into a panic. I replayed the break-in over in my mind, each time imagining worse outcomes. What if I hadn't reached the study in time? What if the door had given way before the police arrived? The questions tormented me, each scenario darker than the last. About a week after the incident, I received a notification on my phone while at school. It was from our new security system, alerting me to movement detected by the front door camera. My heart stopped. I excused myself from class and opened the live feed, half expecting to see another intruder. But there was nothing, just the empty porch and the quiet street. That evening, I checked the system's storage to see if there had been any more alerts. As I scrolled through the footage, my blood ran cold. The camera had captured someone at the front door at 2:07 a.m. the previous night. They were hooded, unidentifiable, but they weren't trying to break in. Instead, they placed something on our doorstep, then left. I hadn't noticed anything unusual that morning. I realized with a sinking feeling that I hadn't been the first one out the door. My dad had left for work early, possibly before the package could be discovered. At dinner, I mentioned the footage nonchalantly, trying to mask my fear. My dad paused, his fork mid-air. "I found an envelope," he said slowly. "It was addressed to you." My hands trembled. What did it say? He exchanged a worried glance with my mom before continuing. "It was a threat, telling you to stop talking about what happened, to stop looking into who did it." The implications were terrifying. Not only had the intruders been physically in our home, but now they were trying to intimidate us into silence. The police, when notified, suggested that the intruders might be part of a larger network, possibly gang-related, and that the break-in wasn't random. They might have believed we had something valuable, or worse, they were targeting us for a specific reason. The following nights were even more strained. My parents took turns staying up, watching the live feeds from the security cameras. I tried to study in my room, but the slightest sound would make me jump. The world felt hostile, unpredictable. Then, 2 nights later, it escalated again. The sound of shattering glass jolted us all awake. A rock thrown through the living room window with another note tied around it. This time, the message was more direct. Last warning, we couldn't stay any longer. The next day, we packed essential belongings and moved into a hotel while we planned our next steps. My parents discussed new identities, moving states, starting over. I felt like a character in a witness protection drama. Only the fear was profoundly real. One evening, as I watched the sunset from the hotel window, my phone buzzed. An unknown number sent a text. "You're safe now. Don't return." No signature, no explanation. We never did go back to the house on Harker Lane. The police investigation continued, but without significant leads. Progress was slow. We moved to another state, adopted new routines, and slowly, life began to regain some normalcy. Kevin, Eliza and I had always been the adventurous type, drawn to the thrill of the outdoors, and the solitude it offered away from our bustling city lives. This trip was to be no different, or so we thought. We decided on a secluded spot in the Appalachian wilderness, known more to locals than tourists, promising dense forests and a serene river that carved its way through the valley. We set out on a Friday, our backpacks loaded with camping gear, food, and of course a couple of bottles of whiskey to enjoy around the campfire. The hike to our campsite was supposed to be straightforward, a 5-mile trek along a well-marked trail, leading directly to a small clearing by the river, perfect for setting up camp. The weather was on our side, with clear skies and a gentle breeze that accompanied us as we made our way through the lush green wilderness. Kevin led the way with a map in hand, confident in his role as the unofficial navigator of our group. Eliza, ever the enthusiast for flora and fauna, took her time to photograph some of the rarer plants we came across. I brought up the rear, soaking in the peaceful sounds of nature that I missed during my weekday office confinement. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of orange and pink, a realization struck us. Somehow, we had veered off the marked trail. The clear path had given way to denser underbrush, and the reassuring signs of human passage were no longer evident. We must have missed a turn back when we stopped for lunch, Kevin speculated, examining the map under the fading light. We should backtrack, but Eliza, peering at her GPS, suggested otherwise. According to this, there's another clearing not too far from here. It might not be our intended spot, but it looks suitable for a night. We can find our way back to the trail in the morning. Her idea was practical. Given our dwindling light, and tired from the day's hike, we agreed to make camp in the unplanned location. By the time we reached the clearing Eliza had pointed out, night had begun to settle in, cloaking the forest in shadows and transforming it into a world that seemed unfamiliar and foreboding. We quickly set up our tents and gathered wood for a fire. The usual banter and laughter that accompanied our camping routines were subdued, replaced by an unspoken unease about our location. Once the fire was roaring, casting a warm glow around our site, we settled down with our drinks, trying to regain the cheerful spirit we had started with. That's when the noises started, subtle at first, easy to dismiss, as the natural sounds of the forest at night. A rustle here, a snap of a twig there. But as the night deepened, so did the strangeness of the noises. They were too rhythmic, too deliberate to be random wildlife. Probably just a deer, Kevin joked half-heartedly. Not wanting to admit his growing nervousness, we decided to turn in early, the day's stress and the eerie sounds taking their toll on our mood. I was about to douse the fire, when a sudden sharp crack echoed through the trees, louder and closer than anything we had heard before. We froze, our eyes searching the dark fringes of the firelight. Before we could react, a scream shattered the night, high-pitched and filled with terror. It wasn't human, or at least it didn't sound like it. It was otherworldly, a sound that seemed to crawl under our skin and lodge itself in our bones. We need to stay inside the tents, I said, voice barely above a whisper, the fear evident. Whatever it is, we don't want to meet it. We hurried into our tents, zipping them shut and listening, as the forest around us erupted into a cacophony of frightful sounds. The scream came again, this time accompanied by a deep guttural growling that seemed to surround our camp. As we huddled in our tents, the night air was filled with the sense that something was moving just beyond the reach of the firelight. Watching, waiting. Inside the tent, the thin fabric seemed like no barrier at all against whatever was out there. Kevin, Eliza and I sat in silence, our breaths shallow, every sound magnified to an almost unbearable intensity. The growling continued, a deep resonant sound that felt almost as if it were vibrating the ground beneath us. It's circling us, Eliza whispered, her voice trembling. Her hand found mine in the darkness, gripping it tightly. Kevin was silent, his breathing heavy, a palpable tension in his quietness. Minutes stretched into hours, or so it seemed, each second a test of our nerves. The fire outside had dwindled to embers, casting only the faintest glow, which seemed to embolden the creature. The growling grew louder, closer, until it was nearly on top of us. Suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating, worse than the growls. Then, without warning, a massive shape blundered into the side of our tent, the force of the impact knocking over one of the support poles. The fabric collapsed partially, creating a terrifying sense of exposure. We scrambled back against the far side of the tent, hearts racing, as the silhouette of a large, indistinct animal loomed over the canvas. "Don't move," Kevin hissed, a note of desperation in his voice. But the creature was relentless. It pawed at the ground and snorted, the smell of wet fur and earth permeating the air. It was searching, probing. In a moment of sheer panic, I did the only thing I could think of. I turned on my flashlight and shone it directly through the tent fabric at the creature. The light seemed to startle it. There was a moment of hesitation, and then, mercifully, the growling receded. We heard it move away, branches snapping under its weight, as it retreated into the darkness. We didn't sleep that night. We sat huddled in our damaged tent, waiting for dawn, jumping at every small sound. When morning finally broke, it brought a sense of relief, but the light revealed the true extent of the night's terror. Outside, the ground around our campsite was torn up, massive paw prints embedded in the mud. Our supplies were scattered, and the remnants of the fire were completely extinguished. The forest, so inviting by day, now seemed a hostile alien landscape. "We need to get out of here," Kevin said, his voice raw. "We pack up and move as fast as we can. Back to the trailhead." Packing was a hurried, frantic affair. We didn't speak much as we stuffed our belongings into our backpacks, each of us lost in our thoughts, shaken by the ordeal. The hike back was tense, each rustle in the underbrush a cause for alarm. As we neared the trailhead, the normal sounds of the forest returned, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted slightly. It wasn't until we saw the first sign of other hikers that we finally allowed ourselves to relax a little. Back in town, we reported our encounter to the local wildlife service. They listened with concern, noting that there had been reports of a large predator in the area, likely drawn by food sources. They thanked us for the information and promised to increase monitoring in the area. The drive home was quiet. Each of us was lost in our own reflections on the fragility of our existence. When faced with the raw forces of nature, the experience bonded us in a way few other things could. A shared trauma that would linger in our memories, a stark reminder of our vulnerability. As for camping, it would be a long time before any of us could even think about sleeping in the wilderness again. When my friends suggested an escape room experience for my birthday, I was thrilled. The thrill of solving puzzles under pressure had always excited me, and the one they chose was reputed to be the best in the city. Known for its immersive experience and challenging puzzles, the theme was abandoned hospital, set in an old industrial building on the outskirts of town. The reviews boasted of its authenticity, claiming it was like stepping into a different world, a world where the walls whispered secrets of the past. We arrived on a dreary Friday evening. The sky overhead, a blanket of ominous clouds. The building itself was an old brick structure that looked like it hadn't seen a tenant in decades, except for the bold sign at the entrance proclaiming, The escape challenge, can you survive? The host, dressed as a deranged doctor, met us in the lobby. His costume was disturbingly realistic, complete with blood-splattered scrubs and a maniacal grin. "Welcome to the abandoned hospital," he crooned, his voice a mixture of delight and menace. "You have 1 hour to solve the puzzles and escape, or be trapped forever in the madness." He led us down a dimly lit corridor that reeked of mildew and decay, the walls lined with peeling paint and old, rusted medical equipment. It felt less like a game and more like we'd stepped into a real abandoned asylum. The atmosphere was unnervingly authentic, each room meticulously designed to unsettle and disorient. We were locked in what appeared to be an old operating room. The lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows on the stained walls. Old surgical tools lay scattered on a metal tray, and a grotesque anatomical dummy sat slumped in the corner, its eyes empty, yet seemingly watching our every move. The game began with a simple puzzle, a combination lock on the door that required a 4-digit code. We scoured the room for clues, eventually uncovering a series of numbers scribbled in what looked disturbingly like blood on the underside of a rusty surgical tray. The lock clicked open, leading us into a series of increasingly horrifying rooms, each with its own set of macabre puzzles. It was in the 4th room, a simulated ward with beds holding mannequins portraying long-suffering patients, that things took a turn for the worse. The room was designed to look like a scene of a mass casualty, with dim lighting and whispered voices playing over hidden speakers, creating an atmosphere thick with despair. We split up to solve different clues. I found myself drawn to a ledger, lying on a bedside table, its pages filled with the names of fictional patients and their disturbing medical histories. As I flipped through the ledger, the door to the room slammed shut with a force that made me jump. Turning around, I realized I was alone. My friends were nowhere in sight. Confused, I called out for them, but there was no answer. Just the continuous loop of whispered voices, growing louder, more insistent. Panic began to claw at my chest as I frantically searched for a way out. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. The mannequins seemed to watch me, their blank eyes following my every move. I stumbled over a loose floorboard, catching myself against a bed, which shifted to reveal a trapdoor beneath. With no other options, and the whispers growing into screams, I opened the trapdoor and descended into the darkness below, hoping to find an exit, but fearing what lay ahead in the unseen depths of the building. The air grew colder as I descended the narrow, rickety ladder leading into the darkness beneath the escape room. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the tight, enclosed space. When my feet finally touched the ground, I found myself in what appeared to be a narrow tunnel, the walls made of rough, unfinished concrete, moisture seeping through the cracks. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, using it as a makeshift flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing a corridor that stretched out ominously in both directions. Remembering the layout of the building, I chose to head left, hoping it would lead me back towards the entrance, or at least away from the chilling room above. The corridor was lined with doors, each one slightly ajar. As I passed, my curiosity overcame my fear, and I pushed one open to look inside. The room was small, claustrophobic, with a single chair in the center, and old faded photographs covering the walls. The pictures were disturbing, black and white images of people with hollow, empty eyes, their expressions twisted in silent screams or maniacal grins. It looked like a collection of patients from a bygone asylum, their stories lost to time. Shaken, I continued down the hallway, the sound of my footsteps bouncing eerily off the walls. The whispers seemed to follow me, growing in intensity, until they were almost deafening. I pressed my hands over my ears, rushing forward, desperate to escape the noise. Suddenly, I emerged into a large, open area that resembled an underground Citrian. It was here that the true purpose of the space revealed itself. It wasn't just a tunnel or a series of rooms. It was a labyrinth, a maze of corridors and dead ends designed to disorient and confuse. And it was not empty. Figures moved in the shadows, their movements jerky and unnatural. As my eyes adjusted, I realized with horror that they weren't people. They were more of those grotesque mannequins, positioned throughout the maze, some seated, some standing, some lying on the ground. But one thing was consistent, their eyes. Each pair was focused on me, tracking my movement through the maze. Panic set in as I tried to find my way through the labyrinth. But every turn seemed to lead me deeper into the maze. I was about to scream out in frustration when I heard a voice. A real human voice calling my name. Over here. It was one of my friends, Alex. Guided by his voice, I finally found my way to the center of the labyrinth, where my friends were gathered. They were pale, shaken, but otherwise unharmed. We shared a collective sigh of relief at being reunited, but realized we still needed to find a way out. That's when we noticed the center of the atrium floor was marked with a large painted red circle. In the middle of the circle was an old television set, the screen flickering to life. As we approached, a grainy video played, showing the room we were in from above, the camera angle revealing the entire labyrinth layout. The video was a recording of us navigating the maze, interspersed with clips of those same unsettling photographs from the rooms, the faces distorted and flickering. A voiceover, distorted and low, spoke one chilling sentence that echoed through the speakers. "You are part of the experiment now." The screen went black, and the room plunged into darkness. We grabbed each other's hands, not willing to lose contact again. After what felt like an eternity, the lights flickered back on. The mannequins that had been in the maze were gone. In their place, a clear path to an exit sign was illuminated. A door we hadn't noticed before. We didn't hesitate. We ran for the door, burst through it, and found ourselves back in the lobby of the escape room. The host, the deranged doctor, was nowhere to be seen. The building was silent, as if no game had ever occurred. We left the building and drove away without looking back, the weight of what had happened settling in. We reported our experience to the authorities, but when they investigated, the building was empty. No sign of any escape room business ever existing there. The rain was relentless that night, hammering against the windshield as I navigated the winding roads back home from a late shift. The darkness seemed to swallow the beam of my headlights, making every turn and dip in the road a heart-pounding gamble. It was the kind of night you'd expect only in a horror movie, where anything lurking beyond the reach of the light felt menacingly close. I was about halfway home, the clock nudging past midnight, when my phone buzzed. A text from my brother Tom. "Where are you? Hurry." Weird, Tom knew my shift didn't end until late. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, but I figured he was just worried about the storm. I picked up speed, eager to get home and dry. That's when I saw her, standing by the roadside, soaked to the bone, thumb outstretched. Normally I'd never stop, especially not on a night like this, but something about her, a sense of familiarity in her posture, the desperate way she seemed to be almost leaping into the light, made me slow down. She ran up to the car, a rush of wind and rain following her in as she climbed into the passenger seat. "Thank you," she breathed, slamming the door shut. She was young, probably in her 20s, with streaks of mud on her face, and her coat torn in several places. "Everything okay?" I asked, the car heater now battling the chill that had swept in with her. "No, I need to get to the police. It's my husband. He's hurt, and there are others." Her voice broke, her eyes wide and terrified. I nodded, pulling back onto the road. My phone buzzed again, another message from Tom, but I ignored it. "What happened?" I pressed, glancing at her as I drove. She was shivering, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Our car crashed, down in the ditch. It's bad. He can't move." And I thought I saw. She trailed off, her gaze darting to the rearview mirror. I followed her eyes just in time to see headlights flicker behind us. There was a car, moving erratically, swerving across the road. My pulse quickened. "Who is that?" "I don't know," she whispered, shrinking back into her seat. "They came after the crash. They were wearing masks." The car accelerated, its engine roaring as it closed the distance between us. I pushed the pedal harder, the trees blurring past us in the storm. "Hang on," I shouted, as the other car slammed into our rear. The impact sent a shock through my spine, the world tilting dangerously. I struggled to keep control, the steering wheel slippery in my grasp. They hit us again, harder this time. The force whipped my head back against the headrest, stars bursting in my vision. I could hear her screaming beside me, the terror in her voice piercing the thunderous crash of the rain. With a desperate maneuver, I turned the wheel, hoping to lose them on a side road. But as we skidded around the corner, a fallen tree blocked the path. The brakes screeched, the car spinning out of control, before coming to a jarring stop against the tree. Dazed, I tried to orient myself. The woman was unconscious, her head lolled to the side, a dark stain spreading across her blouse. Outside, the storm raged on, the other car's headlights casting long shadows that danced wildly around us. Footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, crunching on the gravel. I reached for my phone, fingers trembling. It buzzed one last time with Tom's message, "Don't trust her." But it was too late. The car door opened, and a masked figure leaned in, a gleam of metal in his hand. As the masked figure leaned into the car, the glint of metal in his hand, unmistakably a weapon, every instinct screamed at me to move, to do something, but the crash had left me disoriented, my body slow to respond. The cold air whipped around us, carrying the roar of the rain and the rustle of leaves. It was the perfect cover for a nightmare. "You shouldn't have stopped," the figure said, his voice muffled by the mask. It wasn't just threatening. There was a hint of regret, as if this was the last thing he wanted to be doing. I tried to focus, my hands searching for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers brushed against the umbrella I kept in the side door, flimsy, but it was all I had. I grabbed it, holding it up like a shield. As the man reached in to grab me, the struggle was brief. He was stronger, but the confined space of the car worked in my favor. I managed to jab the umbrella at his face, buying myself a precious second to scramble out of the car on the other side. The rain assaulted me instantly, drenching me as I slipped and slid up the bank beside the road. Behind me, I heard the man curse and the woman stir in the car. She wasn't unconscious, just stunned. Her movement was sluggish as she called out, "Help him." Confusion flooded me. Her plea didn't make sense unless she was in on whatever this was. But there was no time to ponder. I had to put distance between us. I ran into the woods, the darkness enveloping me, branches whipping against my face and arms. As I pushed deeper into the unknown, the sound of footsteps chasing me filled the night. They were relentless, driven, and frighteningly close. I knew I couldn't outrun him forever. I needed to hide, to wait it out until I could make a safer move. Finding a thick underbrush, I crouched down, trying to still my heavy breathing as I heard the footsteps slow, then stop. He was listening, searching. Minutes stretched out like hours. As the rain continued to pour, I dared not move, my entire body tensed for what might come next. Suddenly, a shrill ring shattered the silence. It was my phone. I had forgotten to silence it in the chaos, and now it was giving away my position. I watched helplessly as a pair of boots appeared inches from my hiding spot. I braced myself, ready to fight, ready to scream, but the confrontation I expected didn't come. Instead, a police siren wailed in the distance, growing louder. The masked man hesitated, looking towards the sound, then back at me. For a heartbeat, we locked eyes, his full of conflict and a strange sorrow, mine filled with defiance and fear. Then he turned and disappeared into the woods just as the police lights illuminated the road. I stayed frozen until I saw officers with flashlights combing the area, calling out assurances of safety. They found me, shivering and soaked, but alive. The woman was taken into custody. She had been a willing participant in a series of roadside ambushes orchestrated by her husband, the man in the mask. They had targeted lone travelers, robbing them. Sometimes worse. My survival had been a fluke, aided by my brother's vague warning which he'd sent after seeing a suspicious post on social media about the couple. Recovery was slow. The physical wounds healed quicker than the psychological ones. Trust became a commodity I could no longer afford freely. The open road, once a source of solace, now felt like a sprawling trap. I sold my car, moved to the city, surrounded myself with noise and light, and people. The idea of a silent retreat, deep in the Cascade Mountains, appealed to me as a way to disconnect and find some peace after a stressful year. The retreat promised a week of solitude, meditation, and connection with nature, all conducted in complete silence. It seemed perfect, exactly what I needed to clear my head. Upon arrival, the setting was as picturesque as advertised. The retreat was nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by towering pines and jagged peaks. The main lodge and cabins were rustic but comfortable, blending seamlessly into the wilderness. The retreat's facilitator, a soft-spoken man named Eric, greeted me and the other participants with a warm smile. "Once you cross the threshold," he said, gesturing to the start of a small bridge leading to the cabins, "no word should be spoken until the week is over. Use this time to listen to the silence within and around you." I settled into my small cabin, which was simple: a bed, a desk, and a large window that offered a breathtaking view of the mountains. As I unpacked, the quiet enveloped me like a thick blanket, both comforting and slightly oppressive. The first 2 days passed peacefully. I spent hours walking the forest trails, sitting by the serene lake, and meditating in the lush gardens. The absence of conversation was strangely liberating, my thoughts becoming clearer with each passing hour. However, on the third night, the tranquility was shattered. I awoke suddenly, heart pounding, unsure what had roused me. The moon cast a silver glow through the window, the world outside silent. Then, faintly, I heard it, a soft, dragging sound, like something being pulled across the ground outside my cabin. Curiosity overcame my initial fear, and I peered out the window. In the moonlight, I saw a figure moving slowly between the cabins. It wasn't Eric or any of the staff. This person was dressed entirely in black, their face obscured by a hood. Panic tightened my chest. We were miles from the nearest town, completely isolated. I watched, frozen, as the figure stopped and seemed to look directly at my window. I ducked out of sight, my mind racing. Who was this person? What did they want? I lay back down but didn't sleep. Instead, I listened, every sense strained in the oppressive silence of the night. After what felt like hours, I heard footsteps again, this time moving away from my cabin. As dawn broke, I left my cabin to find Eric and tell him what I'd seen. But I found the lodge in disarray, the door ajar. Inside, Eric was on the floor, unconscious, a dark bruise swelling on his forehead. I wanted to call out, to break the silence, but fear of attracting the intruder's attention kept me mute. Instead, I ran to the nearest cabin, where I knew an older couple was staying. I knocked frantically, until they opened the door. Inside, I wrote a quick note explaining what had happened. Together, we decided to leave immediately and seek help. We hurried back to the main lodge to use the landline, as there was no cell service in the valley. That's when we discovered the phone lines had been cut, leaving us isolated and vulnerable. The realization that we were trapped, potentially with a dangerous person, sent a chill deeper than the mountain air could muster. We gathered in the main lodge, the small group of us who had come seeking peace now united by a growing sense of danger. The atmosphere was tense, the silence of our retreat, now a heavy shroud that muffled our hurried, whispered strategizing. There were 6 of us, including a retired police officer named Darren, who took charge of the situation. "We need to secure the lodge and find a way to signal for help," Darren instructed, his voice low but firm. He had found Eric's walkie-talkie, likely dropped during the struggle, and was attempting to contact anyone on the open channel. As daylight strengthened, so did our resolve to protect ourselves. We barricaded the doors and searched the lodge for anything that could be used as a weapon. Meanwhile, I couldn't shake the image of the hooded figure from my mind. Who were they, and why target our remote retreat? Hours passed with no response on the walkie-talkie, and the isolation of our situation settled in like a dense fog. Our only hope was that a scheduled supply delivery, due the next day, would bring someone who could help. As night approached, the reality of our situation became more pressing. The lodge, usually a place of communal gathering and warmth, now felt like a fortress. We took turns keeping watch, peering into the dimming light for any sign of movement. It was during my shift at the window, the shadows long and deep, when I saw movement at the edge of the forest. A figure, cloaked in black, emerged from between the trees. They moved with purpose, heading straight for the lodge. Alerting the others, we extinguished all lights and watched in silent horror. As the figure approached, Darren signaled for quiet and readiness. As the figure reached the barricaded door, they paused, head tilting as if listening. Then, unexpectedly, they spoke. "I know you're scared." A muffled voice came through the door. "I don't want to hurt you. I need help." Confusion rippled through us, but Darren responded with authority. "Stay where you are. Explain yourself." There was a pause, and then the figure slowly removed their hood. The moonlight illuminated a young woman's face, desperate and frightened. "My brother, he's lost in the woods. I thought he might have come here. He's not well." The story poured out of her in a rush. Her brother, mentally unstable and off his medication, had become disoriented and ran off during their hike. In her panic to find him, she had mistaken Eric for her brother in the darkness, and accidentally struck him. With the truth revealed, our fear transformed into action. Darren and 2 others ventured out with the woman to search for her brother, using flashlights and calling his name. The hours stretched on, the night air filled with the sounds of the forest and distant calls. Finally, just before dawn, the group returned, the woman's brother with them, disheveled and confused but alive. Relief washed over the group, mingled with exhaustion. We had survived the night, a night of misunderstandings and fear, catalyzed by the very silence we had sought to embrace. Eager to escape the monotony of their everyday lives, a group of 5 friends, Alex, Casey, Jamie, Sam and I, planned a weekend getaway to an isolated island, rumored to be untouched by tourists, and known for its pristine natural beauty. The island, a small forest-covered piece of land off the coast, was accessible only by a private boat, which added to its allure of adventure and seclusion. We packed our gear, excited for camping, fishing, and the tranquility that only such a secluded spot could offer. Sam, who had arranged the boat rental, assured us that while the island was off the beaten path, it was perfectly safe, no known dangerous wildlife, and a small ranger station on the other side of the island in case of emergencies. We arrived late Friday afternoon, the sun casting golden hues over the dense trees as our boat neared the sandy shore. The beauty of the island was more breathtaking than we had imagined. White sandy beaches transitioned into lush dense forests that seemed to hum with life. After setting up camp near the beach, we explored the surrounding area, finding paths that led into the heart of the island. As we walked, the trees grew thicker, the canopy blotting out the late afternoon sun, giving the forest a serene yet somber feel. As dusk fell, we gathered around a campfire, the crackling flames, a comforting sound against the encroaching darkness of the island. We roasted marshmallows and shared stories, the light-hearted mood, a stark contrast to the eerie quiet of the surrounding woods. It was during one of Jamie's stories that we first heard it, a distant noise, unlike the typical sounds of the forest. It was a mechanical noise, faint but distinct. Puzzled, we fell silent, straining our ears. The noise stopped as abruptly as it had started, leaving us questioning whether we had heard anything at all, shrugging it off as perhaps a boat in the distance, or machinery from the ranger station. We returned to our stories and laughter. However, the peace of the night was soon shattered. A loud crash came from the direction of our tents, and we jumped up, startled, rushing towards the sound. We found our tents ransacked, our supplies scattered. Panic surged as we tried to process the scene. It looked like an animal had torn through the area, but the precision of the mess spoke otherwise. "It has to be a person," Alex said, his voice tense. "But why? And how did they leave so quickly without us seeing them?" No one had an answer. Unease settled over the group, the isolation of the island suddenly feeling more like a trap than a retreat. We decided to move everything closer to the fire, setting up a makeshift sleeping area where we could all stay together for the night. The decision barely had time to comfort us. When the next disturbance came, a shadow darted between the trees at the edge of the firelight, a human figure gone as quickly as it appeared. Our shouts for them to identify themselves went unanswered. swallowed by the vast wilderness around us. "We need to leave," Casey insisted, fear edging her voice. "First thing in the morning we go back." The rest of the night was restless, each noise from the forest a potential threat. We took turns keeping watch, the fire burning bright, as a beacon and a warning. As dawn broke, we packed up quickly, eager to leave the island behind. But the island, it seemed, wasn't done with us yet. As we approached the beach, a chilling sight awaited us. Our boat, the only link back to the mainland, was adrift, floating aimlessly several yards from shore, far beyond swimming distance, stranded and with someone, or something lurking on the island. Our weekend escape had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Stranded on the island without our only means of escape, panic set in. We stood on the beach, watching helplessly, as the boat bobbed in the water, taunting us with its inaccessibility. The realization that we were truly trapped, coupled with the knowledge of an unknown menace, sent shivers down our spines. "We need to find a way to get the boat back," Jamie said, squinting against the morning light. That did little to warm the chill of dread that had settled over us. Alex nodded, scanning the shoreline. "There might be something in the ranger station that can help. Ropes, maybe even a radio to call for help." The decision made, we gathered what remained of our supplies and set out toward the ranger station, which according to the map, was on the opposite side of the island. Our trek was tense, every rustle in the underbrush a potential threat. We kept close, our earlier excitement about exploring the island replaced by a vigilant caution. As we navigated through the dense forest, the eerie silence was occasionally broken by distant noises, thuds and mechanical sounds that seemed both out of place and ominously deliberate. It was clear we were not alone, and whoever shared the island with us was not just a passive observer. Halfway to the ranger station, Sam, who had been lagging slightly behind, stopped short, causing the rest of us to halt. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the ground. There, partially obscured by fallen leaves, was a trap, a bear trap, its jaws menacingly open. It wasn't rusted or old. It looked relatively new and dangerously functional. "This isn't just some squatter," Sam murmured, his face pale. "Someone's been setting traps. What if there are more?" The realization that we had been walking through a potentially booby-trapped forest made us even more cautious. We proceeded at a painstakingly slow pace, eyes glued to the ground, searching for any signs of traps. After what felt like hours, we finally reached the ranger station, a small one-story building that looked abandoned. The door was unlocked, swinging slightly ajar. Inside, the station was a mess, paper scattered, furniture overturned. It was clear someone had been searching for something, or perhaps someone had made a hasty exit. We rummaged through the chaos, desperately looking for anything useful. I found a walkie-talkie, but after several attempts, it was clear it wasn't functioning, either out of battery or damaged. Alex and Casey found a coil of rope and a few flares. "At least we can try to retrieve the boat," Alex said, trying to muster a tone of optimism. As we prepared to leave, a sudden sound caught our attention. The crackle of a walkie-talkie, not the one I had found, but another. We froze, listening as a voice came through, low and distorted. "You shouldn't have come here." Chills ran down my spine. The voice was followed by a burst of static, then silence. We looked at each other, the same unspoken decision in everyone's eyes. We needed to leave, and quickly. We left the station, heading back to the beach with the rope and flares. Our plan was simple: use the flares to signal for help, and try to use the rope to retrieve the boat. But as we emerged from the trees, the sight that greeted us stopped us cold. The boat was no longer adrift. It was back, tied neatly to a tree, just by the water's edge. As relief washed over us, it was quickly replaced by a sinking feeling. We hadn't brought the boat back. Someone else had. As we approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect, a figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was the hooded person from the previous night, unmasked now, revealing a weathered, bearded face. "I didn't want to hurt anyone," he said, his voice ragged. "Just wanted to scare you off. This island, it's cursed. Bad things happen here." The truth of his words, whether real or the ramblings of a disturbed mind, hung heavy in the air, As we stared at him, the boundary between friend and foe blurred by fear and understanding. But there was no time to unravel his story. The sound of a distant motor broke the tense silence. A boat was approaching, likely drawn by the sight of the flares we'd launched just before finding our own mysteriously returned. Rescue was at hand, but the island's secrets remained, cloaked in the shadows of the trees that had watched over us, a silent witness to the fear that had unfolded in their midst.